does peace mean to you? Do you think flower power or maybe the absence of war? What if
Well,
peace
I
was
think,
actually a modern life skill that you could learn? Our guest today, Reba Parker, author of The Peaceability Mindset, is a sociologist with a peace studies lens, who's here to share how we can practically make peace part of our everyday lives. Reba, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
well, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, as I said just before we hit record, I am going to be completely led by you in this conversation because, I have my own perception of what peace means to me, but you're bringing this into a completely new light. And it's something that you've been working with for years, you're passionate about. Do you want to
Yes.
share a little bit intro of your background and yeah, we go from there.
Okay. That sounds fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My background is I've been teaching at the college level at the College of Charleston for close to 20 years now. And my specialty, my focus has been peace studies. So it's sociology with a peace science kind of studies lens. And I've been teaching this one signature course called Sociology of Peace. I've taught it now over 100 times. So it's a very popular course on our campus. And so I'm going into about 16 years of teaching this course. So interesting question when you ask me what is peace to me. It has totally evolved over the years because as I teach this course, I'm learning more and more from students and I'm seeing for peace for me and the definition of what it is has evolved over time, which led to this book. So I'm pretty excited about how my personal journey and my understanding of peace and that definition that you mentioned early on, how those things have radically changed. And I'm excited to share how I believe that peace is the new frontier for personal well being and societal good. It's this missing ingredient. And the reason I feel like it's missing is because of the way we understand peace and our perceptions of peace, I believe, are dated. They're dated, they're ineffective, and they're not keeping up with the pace of the modern world. And peace can totally do that. So I would like to challenge the audience to be very curious and to be open minded because I'm going to throw in some things that you've probably not heard before. And
Cool.
I'm excited about this. Yeah,
Yeah,
let's
me
do it.
too.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I think um, it can feel peace can like the idea of peace can feel like as an individual, well, what can I do? And so I feel like although I've only had a couple of teasers from your book and got a bit of a sense of what you do, that that you'll kind of share like the importance and the impact that those things can actually have as an individual in our societies. All right. So tell us a little bit more about why peace does feel outdated and like how are you reframing it as a modern life skill, like an actual skill?
For sure. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
take us
Great
there.
question. Great question. I'm ready to dive into this one. Okay, so I started surveying my students years and years ago. And what I found out when they entered my class, Sociology of Peace, they were very skeptic, right? They were like, we don't know what this course is about. So I gave them a survey to kind of see where they were coming from. And what I found out is most of my students were like, we don't know what this course is about, but it sounds easy. Or they would say things like, I feel like this course is going to be how to stop war. Or they thought maybe it was super interpersonal in ways that we're going to learn how to meditate and maybe yoga poses or something. But remember, this is a sociology of peace course. And so and the course didn't really dive into much of any of that, to be honest. But but what I noticed too is when they stepped in the course, they didn't believe that peace was possible. Um, okay. And
Okay,
so
wow.
I asked them really good questions, and the survey began to change over time. But these were the two core questions. Number one, what comes to your mind when you hear the word peace, and what are the feelings associated with it? Okay. And the second question I asked them, this really stands out to me the most, and it's going to answer your question, um, is when you see the peace sign, what comes to your mind? What's your first thought, your very first thought, right? Well, remember, if I've been teaching this course 16 years, that means 16 years ago, these students were much younger. But what I've noticed over the 16 years is their answers haven't changed at all
Wow.
over all that time. The number one answer that comes to mind is the hippies, these, 60s and 70s, flower power, as you mentioned, those kind of things, a VW band with flowers on it, you know, um, those are the things that come to mind. And sometimes they'll mention things like drugs, even, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is what comes to their mind, Woodstock. Now, these things happened 60 years ago. Why is the first thing that pops in their head when they see a peace sign something that happened that many years ago and they weren't even alive, right? They didn't live during that time frame. So this caused me to really think this through. Now, remember, you can Google or go to AI and ask the question, right? What are the five most recognizable symbols in the world, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
live in different countries. But number one is the cross, the Christian cross. The second one is the Red Cross. And the third one's the peace sign. So if the peace sign is seen as one of the most recognizable symbols in the world, and what we think about it is that dated, how can a peace sign resemble relevance? So therefore, I I'm making the deduction through numerous surveys and talking to these students and my friends and others that if the first thing when you see peace sign, the first thing you think about is something like that, and I'm not discrediting what happened back then and the value of that movement, which was very powerful and productive, and it still moves on today. I'm not discrediting that, but I'm saying, what if peace wasn't so limited to that image? And then I asked them, what are the emotions that come up around the word peace? The word peace. And of course, I'm going to get some positive words, right? Like calm and harmony and beautiful unity and, utopian peace, these kind of things. But surprisingly, what I got as well were a lot of notions around uh, things that were negative. So their emotions attached to the peace sign were negative. And
Mm.
when you get a negative emotion brought on by an image, so we see the image, we think something negative, our body is going to respond to that, right? Internally. And how can we move toward peace when our body is throwing off alarms like something's not right here, it's negative? Now you might ask the question, how can a peace be negative and why would they say that? Well, let me give you some of their answers. They said, when I hear the word peace, I get frustrated, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's possible. When I hear the word peace, I get confused
Mm-hmm.
because no one's ever taught me about it. So therefore, I push it at bay because I don't know enough. There's not enough understanding around it. Uh, when I hear the word peace, uh, I get sad because I don't have it, or I don't see it happening in the world. And that makes me very, very sad, right? And so, once a lot of students actually have said the word frivolous,
Mm.
peace is frivolous because they think of a movie with a beauty queen and them making fun of world peace. So these are the images they have associated with the word peace. And when I'm challenging my students and now you folks out there how to move toward peace, we've got to unstick some of these notions, understandings, and images, which will change our feelings and emotion around it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then build new thinking around it. And then with that comes action. That's why I call the book the Peaceability Mindset, because I love the title, because we're incorporating peace with the ability,
Mm-hmm.
which is a paradigm shift because we usually don't put those two together, or a skill set or practical skills. And then the mindset is really critical. We've got to, I believe, begin to rethink peace for today's world so that we can then begin to move into it in so many powerful ways.
Wow. I, you know, excuse me. It's really interesting because I'd never, as I said, you're the you're the expert, and I'm going to be led by you throughout this conversation. But I have actually never really thought much beyond peace, and you bringing those things up, like what does the symbol mean to you? And I just want to do this.
Sure.
And I've envisaged, people protesting about the nuclear weapons in the 80s. But really interesting how peace is kind of seen as a place in history where it happened, and we don't really consider it as part of our lives now. In fact, there's so much stuff, especially in the news, on social media, about conflict, and that's really like feels like the focus. Peace doesn't even play a part in those areas, right?
Right.
That's why we need books like yours.
For sure.
So how do we start reframing peace as a modern life skill?
Well, I think, look, from a sociological angle, I'm going to start there. But I know your audience. I know your audience. I don't know them that well, let's say, but I know where your podcast has headed all this time.
Hmm.
And I know it's a lot about wellness and transformation or transitioning to betterment, right?
Yep.
I'm going to get there today, so don't worry about that. And I want to frame it around a larger context, sociological context, and then we're going to get into that personal, right? And how I
Hmm.
can apply my day-to-day life. But I want to start off by saying this. As a society at large, whatever your society is, we have norms. We have values, we have norms. And in my book, I talk about the bell curve. So you have a bell curve, right?
Hmm.
And on the 4.8% on the edges of a bell curve out here are considered outside the norm. And that about 68% that comes up with the bell curve, that's what's normal in a society. Now, guess what? Who wants to be on the outskirts? Some people don't mind, but most people want to fit in. And I believe that our culture has set peace up for failure. Maybe not intentionally, but our culture is not set up to really run peace the way it could run in so many beautiful lanes and create so much change. And so, one of the first steps we can start doing is begin to normalize peace, where peace is seen as a very normal part of our culture instead of on the fringes. On the fringes, we see people, the outliers, and we go, they're deviant. The beautiful thing about sociology, one of the things we teach is positive deviance. There's something called positive deviance, and that's where the people on the outskirts see something that needs to change in society and they start moving what's not seen as the norm into the norm and pushing the envelope of status quo, right? And when that happens, things change. But of course, we know that the people in charge of the norms in a society want to keep that at bay. So, my number one response to your question would be, how do we start moving and rethinking? We've got to start changing norms, and those start in our institutions, which is our politics, it's our military, it's our homes, it's our religious structures, it's our economics, It's all of that and more, right? And media. And we began to talk about peace in, I would like to say, practical ways, but also spiritual ways as well, right? And
Hmm.
then that interconnection with the universe and everything else. So it's such a broad, beautiful way to live your life. And so the way you really started in your own domain is where you are doing what you do. Nadine, your podcast is reaching a lot of people, and this is your gift, one of your gifts to the world. This is a way you could open the floodgate to what peace could look like, so we could get this thing going, right?
Mm.
But I'm a teacher and a speaker and a writer, so these are the modalities I'm going to use. But people in the environment, there's so many good avenues that we can use to begin to talk about peace. So begin to talk about it and then learn some things that you can do to begin moving it forward. Start there, and when people see it in their classrooms, like kids learn the tools of peace in their classroom or in our places of worship, and even in our politics, people are going to go, oh, and it becomes normalized. I would start there.
Cool. A
Yeah.
word that popped up for me was fear. And I think that a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff that we learn, even the environments that we're in, it's a lot of it's fear based, isn't it? And we want to change it to peace based.
Yes.
So,
Oh, for sure.
fear based about, not having enough money, fear based about
Yeah.
protecting yourself as a child when you're in school, having to look after yourself. What if we could
Yeah.
change all of those things to peace based? It would be like if we could just, yeah, picture that for a minute. And
Yeah. Oh,
oh my God.
doesn't that feel good already? My
Yes.
body just felt good when you said
Yeah,
that. It felt
exactly. The
great.
nervous system just goes,
That's right. And I'm glad you brought that up because, man, I tell you what, science is doing some amazing things uh, with quantum physics, but neuroscience and the microbiome and all of these things, right? And we're learning that we are so interconnected.
mm,
But that piece that you just said, our nervous system, when we're in that sympathetic state, we cannot really rest in peace because we're hypervigilant, right?
mm.
So I would like to turn the conversation here a little bit.
Okay.
And I'm going to lead with what you just said, because you mentioned something very important. And it's like, can you live in cultures of peace, whether that's your home or your inner self or your neighborhood or your nation? Can you live in cultures of peace if you don't feel safe?
Mm,
Okay, now, uh, what I came up with to help my students and now you folks understand peace in a simplified way, right? I want these to be very honed down practical tools and steps that you can take, but it comes with understanding a very complicated topic. Or maybe it's not that complicated, right? But how can we pare it down into parts that become easy to remember, that are powerful, and then we can use those parts to activate action? So I came up with a formula for peace. Okay. And Nadine, you brought up the first part of it is number one. Let me give you the three ingredients to peace, right? And then we can talk about them just briefly.
yep.
The first ingredient is safety. And when I think of safety attached, it's that need to survive, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Safety. Second, so think of safety plus, put a plus sign. I love the second one. Well-being, well-beingness, well-beingness. So well-being is moving toward thriving.
Yep.
So if safety's surviving, well-being is growing. It's growing, it's expansion, it is thriving. The third ingredient in the peace equation is interconnectedness.
Mm,
I love that because that is when we reach states of transcendence or moving beyond ourselves. And that's that notion, of course, that we're all interconnected, all of us and all living things and all planets, everything. And with that, I use the word provide. So we provide the universe and the soil and our air and the animals, they all provide us so much, and our dogs, right? And our families, they provide, and then we provide back because we are interrelated, interlinked, interconnected. Me helping you, you're helping me, along with the universe, etc. And we're all coming in at this together.
Yeah.
So if you have safety and well-being, that could be a very selfish path, right? Oh, I'm going to keep myself safe and I'm going to grow and be the best version of myself. But when you don't connect that third piece,
Mm.
then
What's the
it's
point?
what's the point? What is the point?
Yeah.
So that this is the equation I like to share with my students to help them understand that when you have this place of safety, which is lack of fear, and you're not that sympathetic anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can calm your nervous system and be open to who you are and the beautiful gifts you've been given. And all of this is flooding your body, and you're feeling being alive. And what brings you joy and happiness, you're feeling that. And you can't, for me, you can't help but once you are just bursting with well being, you can't help but want to give that away. You can't help but want to revere the environment. I can't. It's all in one package. So to me, that's the fullness of peace. That's the fullness. Safety is important, well-being is important, but the three of them together, these three ingredients can help us really move into these levels of a fuller peace.
Mm. Do you see that as linear or cyclical or
Oh, yeah.
neither of those things?
Yeah, I've been toying with that. I've been toying with that, and I love to think of it circular, right?
Mm.
Um, but I also realize that life moves with ebb and flows as well.
Mm.
So I think of that as well. That peace is a process. It's not a state of being that we get to. And what's interesting when I ask my students this, I just find this so fascinating, the roadblocks to peace. They have these roadblocks to peace. And I ask them, what's holding you back? And there's certain things they say. For example, uh, one of the roadblocks for peace is, well, we'll never have peace. And the
Mm.
reason why is because we all won't get there together. We have too many opinions, etc. And we're different people. So we'll never all get there. And I'm like, why do we all have to get there universally for
Mm.
peace to happen? There's this weird thing about peace, the word peace. When I ask my students, do you believe peace is possible on a survey? You know what a lot of them say? Here's what they say no. And then the reason they give is because they will say, we will never have world peace.
Ah.
I did not ask them, is world peace possible? I asked them, is peace possible? But their head automatically went to utopian
Mm.
visions of this static peace that will all come together one day. Why is the word world attached to their understanding of peace? And then I like to respond with, well, what about love? Can you love your partner? Can you love your dog? Can you love your neighbor? Oh, but we're not getting there all together universally for love to happen, for it to be real and present. And it's not static and going like it's ebb and flow, right? Sometimes we're not feeling as much love but it doesn't mean love's not there. And the same with peace. So these one of the biggest roadblocks is this notion of we all can't agree, so we'll never get there one day. And
Mm.
I'm like, you can have it right now, just like you can have love right now.
Mm.
And it's
It
not based on what another country's doing.
No. Well, we've got completely distracted with that, haven't we? Just with the access to so
Yes,
much information beyond our
yes,
everyday, like, and we see all of these things which can lead to confused emotions, feelings of lack of control, probably, because we're so focused on
yeah.
all of those things that are going on everywhere else in the world. We forget that we
Hopelessness,
can have,
despair.
that we can have an impact in our own environments, in our everyday lives.
Right.
How do peace and love differ? How would you define that?
That is a great question, and I've never been asked
No
that. I might need to.
pressure.
No, no, I love the question. Um, I think, I mean, let me give you my definition of peace, not from an academic viewpoint, which I can give that too, but this is my personalized definition of peace for my own life. Okay. Um, it the definition for me, and I offered it in the book as well, is when you're at that place where you can say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. So it's this deep, rich state of being where you feel content or, and I have a hard time with that content. I'll come back to that. But this place where everything's going to be okay, or you're okay in spite of everything that's going on around you. So it is well with my soul. Even when there's turmoil happening around you, you are at a place where you are feel um, calm, content, and resolute that it's going to be okay. And I think love is this deep feeling of sincere appreciation for something or someone. So I think that's just a little bit different.
Yeah. I guess love you might also see as personal self-acceptance,
For sure.
because
And
the people and the environments around us can be a mirror, can't they?
yes, for sure.
So peace, although that's also in your perspective something that all is well in my soul, with my soul,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like how that, whoa, yeah, it's a fine line, isn't it, actually, between those
It
two?
really, yeah, it is. They are, it's pretty fine line
Yeah, yeah,
to be for sure.
yeah.
I really want to dive into that more and think about it.
Okay.
Um, but
Not now.
yeah, and the definition, by the way, the definition I gave for peace is that more internalized peace.
Yeah, yeah.
And my book, it does talk about those things because it's not just about the societal levels of peace. And I think people really want to bring it in to the personal. So I talk about the 5 habits of peace, the 5 steps to inner peace. One of my favorite chapters is peace in the environment and that connection. A lot of people, and I say a lot of people that I've talked to, but also my students, they are blown away. There's a connection between peace and the environment. So there's so many layers to this. So it is well with my soul is that more personal inner peace kind of understanding. And then again, peace is not limited to one definition, right?
Yeah,
And so there's so many layers to it, but in my view, they lead to the same place.
yeah, yeah. I'd love to get into some of the factors that you can use in daily life and also the peace in the environment that you've just mentioned. But
Oh yeah.
before that, can we talk about, you'll know what I'm talking about, I'm sure, the butterfly effect. Do you know
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
I do. Um, I think that the notion of peace in your own life, uh, you begin, you can't help but want to pass that on, and then that begins to affect others, right?
Hmm.
Over time, and there's a rippling effect that just keeps moving out and forward.
Change the bell curve.
Change, change the bell curve. And that's why when my students say, um, what I'm just one person, how can I
Mm,
change this big notion of peace? It is by daily actions and steps and attitude changes and perceptions. And look, when I'm married and we have 3 kids, uh, what we're showing them in our home, and two of our kids have moved on and they're grown now, but they're watching
mm,
how we play out life every day, and they're learning this and these tools and these skills and these practices of how we resolve conflict in a home, or the atmosphere in our home, or the habits we have. And then sometimes we don't even label those as peace actions, but they are. And then they're going to take that into their families and their homes and into their careers. And
yeah.
it just keeps building from there. But I really believe there's got to be, uh, okay, let me just say, I would hope there would be an intentional kind of uh, let's do this thing,
Mm,
where we get on board and say it's time. I think
yep.
we've treated peace as a noun for too long, and it's really now we can't see it as a noun, but we can just see it as a verb. And uh, I would like to tell a little story if I can.
Yeah, please.
Okay. My mother, when I told, she's not here with us anymore, and my dad either, but when I told my mother years ago I was going to teach a class on peace, she said, I'll never forget it. She said, Reba, that's ridiculous.
Thanks, Mum.
That is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. And I'm like, okay. Now, that didn't feel very good because you want your parents to be proud of you. Now, my dad, who's my hero, he was kind of sitting on the sidelines, not saying much. But he's my dad was a professor, and he was my role model through life. He's just wonderful. But my mom was like, just flat out, that's ridiculous. And the reason she said, we'll never have peace until Jesus comes. Right. So I'm like, okay. I believe my mother thought this is all leading to political sides of some sort or something. And I'm like, no, and so I had to come up with a pitch, at least I thought I did, come up with a pitch to sell my mom that the idea of a class on the sociology of peace was needed and important and not ridiculous. So I came up with a pitch. And here was my pitch, my little 1 2 sentence pitch. I said, Mom, we can either move toward cultures of peace or cultures of violence. Think of a spectrum.
Mm,
You have a culture of violence here, a culture of peace here. I said, every day we're moving toward one or the other. What if I could teach my students how to move toward the culture of peace in their inner life, in their family, in their community? If I can help them to see skills and tools, here we are back at the skill base, that help them move their action based steps they can take, and it gets them closer there. Isn't that progress? And isn't that wonderful? Well, my mother still wasn't buying it, but my dad, he sat there and took it in. And I started using that in my courses. And I think it's a good way to understand that peace is a process. And when we have political policy, when we have policies, right, governmental policies, they are either moving this way or that way.
mm,
Why would we have a policy in our country that's moving us away from optimal peace, right?
mm-hmm.
So it's this idea that we can always be moving toward, or most of the time, move toward peace if we know how and understand that that's possible, and then have some skills and tools to get there. So, do I believe peace is possible? Absolutely. I do it every day, and I have ebbs and flow like everyone else in life. But yes, it's possible, and let's get going.
Mm. I love that you've put it on that spectrum as well, because it, conflict and peace. I mean, for want of a better word, conflict can mean so many different things, but
Yeah,
it's almost like the negative and the positive. But you almost can't have one without the other either, can you? It does
that's
ebb and
right.
flow.
It does, and that's the beautiful thing about a paradox.
Mm,
And you know, I mentioned this idea of a paradox of peace, where a lot of people, when they think of peace, they think of a still pond,
mm,
right? A still pond of water where the water is barely moving and it's just calm and relaxing and
mm,
ironic and just amazing. And then some of your audience that are growth mindsetters, right?
mm-hmm,
That growth mindset, they're going to see maybe peace more like a river, and it's flowing and it's moving and it's full of life, and there's growth and expansion, and we're progressively moving to better ways of living and better societies and better ways to take care of our environment. And that's moving us toward this culture of peace, right? And we're excited about it. And you're filled with peace because you know that you're doing something that's getting you and other people there closer, closer, right? So there's a paradox because I want both of those.
mm,
I want them both, and I can have them both, and you can too, right? So to put them in boxes and say peace is only this pond, this still pond, we're missing so much.
mm,
But to say it's about action and movement without having embodying that place of it is well with my soul, right? And
mm,
having that space, that beautiful space where we connect with all things, that is so beautiful. And we need both.
mm,
And peace is the absence of war. It is. And it is what happened. It is protest. It can be seen through protest, but it also can be other things as well, like taking care of the environment, working toward human rights, respect for all people. All of these kind of things are helping us move that way.
mm. Yeah.
And that the word I use for that is peaceability. Peaceability is the peaceability is the ability to do peace. Another way I explain it is it's peace plus a growth mindset.
Mm,
So you take peace and you attach a growth mindset to it, and now we're on our way because a growth mindset says, well, we might not have peace right now, here, here, and here, but how can we? And what tools can we use? What skills, or how do I need to understand the other in order to get there? There's ways to it. Let's figure it out. A fixed mindset, of course, says this is how things are. People will never change. I have students all the time. They will say, we'll always have tyrants in the world,
mm.
bad actors in our communities, and therefore we'll never have peace. Not true.
Not true.
So with get this, with awareness, right? With awareness, we can say, okay, there's bad actors over there and there's horrible people leaving these countries, whatever, and it's a mess. But do I have peace in my home right now? Yes. Do I have peace in my relationship right now? Yes. And what else can I do? Oh, my company, we can start having training sessions on empathetic listening. And is our company now becoming more peaceful? Yes. So is peace possible? Yes. Is peace happening? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is that country over there still having vicious war? Yes.
Yes.
And that's the paradox of
Mm,
peace. But sitting still and hoping that peace will come, or sitting still and wishing for peace, it's time to be active and to change I believe, to rethink peace. And if peace isn't working for you, why? And how can we crank it up and get it moving So it not only impacts your life, but those around you, and then spreads out.
Yeah. Amazing. You
Mhm.
mentioned your own home life, your family, your three
Yeah,
kids,
yeah,
and how peace can play a role in conflict resolution or the way that you deal with conflict. Can you give an
yes.
example of a less peaceable versus a
Oh,
peaceable in that kind of situation? I think those kind of things, those real life things are really helpful.
for sure. We brought up the notion of safety early on, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine a home where the spouse comes home or the child and they don't feel safe, where they're walking on eggshells because they don't know if their parent is going to be present or neglectful or violent? They never know. There's no
Mm,
consistency. And so they're fearful because they don't know what's getting ready to come down, right? Or they're afraid their parents might get into another conflict and start arguing and yelling, those kind of things. Um, so, how can you begin to think in terms of, well, this is our domain, this is my haven, my home. How can we have a place that feels safe? Let's go back to the three ingredients, right? My home feels safe. I'm speaking for myself. My home feels very safe. Number two, my home is so filled with well beingness. Like when I get a crazy idea because I want to grow as a human, you know, my family's on board. They're going, okay, here she goes again. But they're like, she wants to stretch and grow and let's do it. And they support me, right? And then you have that interconnectedness too. And I think that's important in a home and a family. But to answer more specifically, what we do in our home, I would, on that spectrum of peace, I have another spectrum and it's optimal peace and fragile peace. Okay. Fragile here in a home, you have fragile peace or optimal. I want to move toward optimal in my home. So I would give our home right now 9.3 or something like that. It's high up. And guess what? We don't yell in this house. And it's not because that's a rule, but it's just not who we are. So we don't yell. And there's a lot of respect for each other's privacy or their need to have a quiet space or time. So there's a sense of respect and uh, and also that notion of well-being. But I think another thing's important is to live nonviolently, and um, I offer that up as one of the five habits of peace. And so things we do to live in our home nonviolently. For me, this is for me personally. Not all my family's on board with this, and that's okay because they have their own journey. But for me to live nonviolently, I switched from meat eating. I grew up in Texas to I'm a vegan now, and part of that was for my body wellness as I learn and grow. But the other part is because of that notion of killing animals. I don't want to
mm,
for my food. Now, that's a personal decision. And like I said, my whole family's not on board with that. But I am. That's where I want to be. But what we watch on television, it's not going to be filled and riddled with violence.
mm.
And the music that we play in our home doesn't have violent lyrics because that goes against the very motto of who we are in our home. So, but I think one of the most important things is how you mentioned this notion of resolving conflict.
Mm,
So we are very skilled in, I say very skilled, we have skills, I'd like to say we have skills in resolving conflict. And so when that happens, we give each other space sometimes to kind of work through our feelings and see them and address them and feel them, recognize the anger or whatever it might be, and then come back. And then we understand what the triggering parts are. I'm more avoidant, my partner's more anxious, and we work toward that secure place through rupture and repair and making up when there's a mishap. And it's
mm.
really important that when you have a wound, that you come back and repair that. And that creates a safe place because you know that if there's another disruption in the home, guess what? We're going to figure this out. We got each other and we value and respect each other enough to deal with it, even when it's hard. And so these are just some things. Um, so nonviolent communication or compassionate talking or communication is really important. Empathetic listening or skills we use in our home, very, very important. These are tools and skills,
Yeah.
right? And we use them and they work. And we live in a peaceful home 90 point something percent of the time. But I want to say this, and I know I'm kind of going on a little bit, but I
That's all
want to
right.
say this in contrast because this is important. Nadine, about 13 years ago or so, I was in a partnership that was turned very violent, to where I was physically thrown against the wall, to violent language, to things that were very dangerous. For I needed to call the police. I slept with my keys in my pocket in case I needed to escape and have the right things in my car. I know what it feels like to be in a violent home and to lay in bed scared. And I even had to go to the hospital a few times because my blood pressure was so high because I was so fearful. All of that to say, I've been there
Mm.
where the language was violent and the actions were violent, are not caring and kind, or were not consistent. You never knew what was going to be the trigger that blew things up. Um, I was fearful for my job. I lost my friends. My bank account got drained. My credit score went down. My relationship with my children was in harm's way because I didn't want them coming over and having to be a part of that. And even my dog
Mm.
was traumatized and still is to this day. It was the lowest part of my life. And what's even happened even more so is that my personal well-being, but my you mentioned earlier your love for yourself, right?
Mm.
Was at the bottom. I didn't trust myself for making that kind of decision to be in that relationship. So many things. So I had to rebuild. And for me to get back into, I say get back, for me to find a new relationship that is night and day took a lot.
Mm.
Therapy and other things. I had to work through that. But I know what it feels like. And I know some of your listeners are at these rough spaces where they don't feel safe at home,
Mm.
right? And yet you want peace in your life, but if your home's not safe, ooh, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
And so there's things you can do to begin to build a way out or through it, um, and that resilience, but also, you know, find safety. That's critical. Find safety
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that.
for
Um,
sure.
I was, you kind of answered it. I was thinking, what does someone do in that circumstance? Like when they are striving for peace, but they're in an unpeaceful environment. And I don't know whether peace in the environment works into this actually, or whether
Yeah.
you're talking more about the environment at large. But how
Yeah.
does that, if you've got someone who is on that
Mm.
polar opposite end of where you're trying to
Yes.
get,
Yes.
it's it's tricky, isn't it? Because you can't
Yes.
fix everyone. Like we've talked about
No.
that knock-on effect that you can have, but you can't, sometimes you just can't fix those circumstances.
Right. Um, you sometimes you cannot. In that particular situation, uh, we did seek counseling as a
Uh-huh.
couple, but then that fell short. It never happened. That was one of the kind of conditions that we set up, and I realized over time that I needed to remove myself from that situation, and I even ended up moving. out of the state.
Wow.
Uh, yeah. Um, so sometimes, and that's why I want to be real careful here and disclaimer that, sometimes you need to make the best decision for yourself, and that's to remove yourself from violence, of
Mm.
course, if you can't see a way out of it together. And so I had to remove myself. Uh, Now some of your audience might be in a situation where they know that the person they're with could actually, with help, change, right? Then
Mm.
then move forward with that the best you can. But if you see your life's in harm's way on a continuous basis, seek professional help. Seek professional help, and friends and family that you trust, and find your way out. And then I had to go through EMDR or therapy to work through my trauma,
Yeah.
which I did, which I did. And so now that trauma is more like a memory of wisdom
Mm.
versus triggering fear and alarm
Yeah.
when I think about it now because of the work I did. So I think healing yourself or working on yourself or self-help or, you know, taking care and loving your own being is a peace movement.
Yeah.
It's a peace movement.
Yeah.
And a peace movement doesn't have to be protest signs. It can be you doing those kind of things and leading yourself to that place where you can go, it is well with my soul.
Mm. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you share with us? We're getting close to the end of our hour, but
Okay.
we did mention previously the peace and the environment, and what I think
Yeah.
you sort of said that for your students that was a real eye opener.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Yeah. Okay. Let me give you a little story as a context, right? So I also, when I taught at the Citadel, and if your audience isn't familiar with the Citadel, it's one of the premier and one of the oldest military universities in the United States. Um, and so I taught at the Citadel with 35 cadets in a room, all in uniform, and I taught this class, Sociology of Peace. And they were like, "Oh my gosh, we just came out of class on strategies of war, and now we're coming into a class where there's strategies for peace that really work." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's do it." But I remember one time we were talking about peace in the environment, and a student stood up, and the student was red faced. In other words, angry.
Mm-hmm.
And the student said, "Okay, this environment discussion, I'm going to keep driving my gas guzzling truck because it's mine and I want to. And I want to keep the lights on in my house anytime I want because I pay the bills and it's my house. And if I want to put something in the creek behind my yard, I can because it's on my property." And the student was frustrated that I was bringing in new ways to look at our relationship with the environment, right? And the way the student saw this relationship, and it makes sense because our cultures teach us this, is we have domination over the environment.
Mm.
And if we want to do something with it, we can take it, whatever we want. We can go ahead and just use up for our personal gain with no reflection on how it's going to affect the environment at large, right? So this mindset. So I said, what if instead of us having authority over the environment or something that we use, what if it's a relationship that's community based? In other words, this notion of land ethic, where everything is a part of the community. The trees that I'm seeing out my window right now, and our animals, and the insects, and the micro organisms under the soil, we're all in this together. It's that interconnectedness. What if we see the environment like that and see it with a new lens? And then he said, "Well, if this is a tree hugging thing, I don't want to have anything to do with it." And I said, and we began to have dialogue. I think that's important instead of debating. And so we had dialogue around these notions of, um, we're all in this together. And I think peace in the environment starts with reverence for the environment.
Mm,
When you revere the environment, one thing I love about the environment, Nadine, is this: the environment gives us safety,
mm,
doesn't it?
yeah,
Does it give us well-beingness, the food and the trees and our shelter, well-beingness? And does it get it? It is a part of this large interconnectedness. It does all of it.
yeah,
So the environment on the earth, but also beyond the earth, it leads us to this place of peace. So another notion I use in my class is this idea of 7 generations out. And with the peace studies lens, you're looking 7 generations out and thinking about people that are going to come past you, and what you can do to help set up cultures of peace for them ahead of time. And that's by taking care of, loving, appreciating the environment, and connecting to it.
lovely. I love that. Yeah, lots of things going through my head. When I had my children late in life, so I was 40 when I had my first child, and 42 with my second. But one of the things that I've often said is that, like, in my younger years, I didn't want to have kids because I thought the world's messed up. I don't want to bring children in. What a place to live, kind of thing, and it's just going down the pan. And then when I did have my children, I'm like, these could be the change makers.
Yes,
And when you're talking about 7 generations down the track and setting those things up, I feel like there's a lot of things, including your book and the movement that you're part of,
yeah,
that is in preparation for that, and the way that we learn, evolve, and teach our children those
yeah,
new ways of being are the things that are going to have those knock-on effects.
sure, for sure, absolutely. And there's so many places where we can move into peace.
Mm,
And so as a teacher or speaker or whatever, I still want to take precious care of the environment, right?
mm,
And I still want to work toward human rights and the dignity of all people in the social groups I'm a part of. And I could go on and on. So I want to touch all these different facets. And peace is a framework too. It's a framework. It's a value. It's a framework. And the framework is all of these sectors in a society can do their part toward peace. Transparency of media is a
mm,
peace action, right? And so when we can tap into a lot of them, and that's how we live our life and live through a peaceful home. But I think we all have these gifts, and that's where we want to put a lot of focus and attention. And so, what is that gift that you have, your listeners have, that they
mm.
can offer up in your own unique way to help people see that your actions are creating a movement toward culture of peace in their wherever you live, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
definitely.
don't lose hope. Peace is possible. It happens every single day, and it happens through the way you listen, the way you talk to someone. There's so many, not talk to someone, but speak with them. It happens in so many ways, and we can get empowered by that, um, and move it forward. So peace ability is the ability to do peace. So let's get doing. We've
Let's
got
get
some work to
doing it.
do, and it's exciting. And can you imagine if just a small portion of our society began to see peace differently, and not in such a limited way, but an expansive, unlimited way,
Mm,
where we can hopefully one day live in better places in different countries. And there are countries that Iceland is the number one most peaceful country in the world, and it's measured. And so you can measure peace. The United States falls 128. Australia falls 18
oh,
out of 163 countries. Not bad.
not
That's
bad.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So why is Australia 18 and Iceland 1 and the United States 128? And Russia's at the very bottom. Why? It's because look at what they do and their policies, etc., and how they're taking care of their people,
Mm,
well-beingness, right? And interconnected dignity of all people. You start putting all the pieces together, safety, well-beingness toward their citizens, interconnectedness of their citizens, and you're starting to move toward cultures of peace. You take those things away, safety, you
Mm.
take away well-beingness, healthcare, et cetera. You take away their ability to connect through the internet and other things or countries around you, and you move toward cultures of violence. This is measurable,
Yeah,
and it's a roadmap, and it's doable. We can do these things.
love it. If there was one tip that you could share with our listeners today for how they can start to take action with peace in their own lives,
Yeah,
I don't know how simple it is, but it sounds like it's pretty
yeah,
pretty simple if we're
yeah.
conscious of making those choices. What would one thing
Yeah.
be that you'd say this is the
Mm.
top? Do you have a favorite?
I think, yeah. I'm gonna go with today. I might change it up down the road, but I would say what my students are taking away from my class the most that impacts their life as they leave my class is I teach two tools: nonviolent communication or compassionate speaking, and empathetic listening or deep listening. I think there's two sides to a coin. So if you
Mm,
don't know what those are, a good place to start is learn about those and learn how to implement those and use it with your own personal life. Speak to yourself kindly with compassion and listen to yourself and your felt sense in your body. That's a good place to start.
okay.
So I would start there. Um, but there's so much more.
Yep. Wow. Thank you so much. We are going to share your profile in our guest directory, so everyone will have a link to the book, so that we can find that and
Okay,
start
great.
making peace part of our everyday lives. Thank you so much for joining us, Reba. It's been really insightful, and I've loved the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and to all your audience, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome.